Hey, everybody.
Hi. I don't know why
What was that? I don't know.
Doing it. I decided to do it, but I did it more like
I got
That's my coming soon dance.
coming soon.
To a theater near you.
We are doing a reaction to the trailer The Nevers, which looks pretty crazy.
Series on HBO.
That's right. But before we do, make sure you guys subscribe. We're
Yep.
just gonna completely just bag
and
comment and subscribe.
Yeah.
They tell us to do this, so we're doing it.
Okay. It's the rules.
We have to. It's against our will, but we're doing it.
Shall I wake up Biff and tell him to roll the trailer?
Biff!
Is it Biff now? Did we fire Jerry?
It's always been Biff.
Did we fire Jerry?
It's always been Biff. Will always be Biff.
I miss Jerry.
Poor guy. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get him on it. Tell him to pull up that trailer.
Let's do it.
Roll that trailer.
3 years ago, everyone at the Touched woke up with a power.
Nice and gothic.
Touched are rewriting the rules of reality.
Victorian.
I want them under control,
Oh, what was that?
even if it requires a bloodletting. I will cut your face to a mess.
Nick Frost, who I always like.
Oh yeah, I love how she kind of leaned into the razor.
Touched. Yes, they have weird deformities and afflictions.
They're unhappy. Well, whatever they are, I think they're a gold mine.
Let's call them
You know what a better
X-Men.
world could be like.
Is that the mission you were going on about?
Yes, I do have a mission, and I'm not cut out for it. But it matters.
There's a harmony to our world that's worth preserving.
The Touched are not a threat, yet you seem determined to prove that they are.
The church, the purists, they're a danger to us. We have enemies we don't know about yet. Oops.
I am here for a reason.
Our first response cannot be hate. We'll be lined up in the streets.
I want the wicked punished and the good protected. You often engage in public violence.
Ben
Nowhere to
Chaplin,
have a
always
fight,
good.
'cause I see glimpses of the future.
Something happened.
Nice.
It's not fun watching you throw yourself at danger like you think it's gonna propose.
Could be fun.
There's savagery, chaos.
The Touched,
Okay, that gun was
protection,
cool.
And I need information about why we're here and what we're meant to do next.
We're taking a terrible risk.
The future of the world depends on what I'm doing.
The future of the world depends on the present.
The Touched are part of something much bigger.
Well,
Looks
Wow.
pretty interesting.
certainly a lot going on there. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot going
That
on.
was gorgeous. You know what it reminds me of, and I miss it so much, is Penny Dreadful. God, I love that show. So good. It's kind of similar to that. So I'm getting the impression that it's only women who have the afflictions.
It's like the League of Extraordinary Gentlewomen.
That's what I was
know?
thinking.
All
Yeah.
right. Because I
Yeah,
think it's interesting that you have all these women who have all these special qualities and all the men who want to exploit it. How unusual. Such a
Right.
strange concept.
It
Well, it's-
looks beautiful.
Yeah.
You know.
It's kind of an X-Men vibe, it's a group of people who are oppressed because of their differences, and it's kind of, you kind of know where it's going, in some ways. There's going to be people who are out to get them because they don't fit in and all that, but and then you have the standard collection of superpowers. I hope they do something. Maybe they'll take something and do something interesting with that, you know.
Well, I didn't see really overtly what the powers were exactly. Did
Well, there
we
was
see
the fire.
He has
The
fire
so
that they
just the
can,
fire, but is that the only
somebody
one
is
to really?
large, like, you know, the
Yeah,
giant
but
man,
is that
like
a power?
Ant-Man can get big,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then there looked like somebody who could teleport, you know, and
I think that what makes it kind of cool though is sort of the time frame,
yeah,
and the gothic sort of Victorian
It
looking
has a steampunk
history,
vibe to it, which
steampunk. And
it,
women, women were very much like, sidelined during that time in history. So I think it's interesting that they would have this sort of feminist message inside that time frame, with the idea that sort of in a way it's almost like symbolic, like women have these special qualities, but they're only for men to use, instead of,
right.
right.
And that you're not allowed to show
making
off
them
your
equal.
abilities.
Yeah. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, you have the special thing. Let me think, how can I use that to my advantage? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
this
think
It's got that kind of, like you were saying, steampunk vibe to it. You know, there was like a car in there that they had, and
Oh, that
Mhm.
cool gun that looked
guns
like
and
was on
stuff.
his arm. A beautiful design.
Yeah, it's got some
Yeah.
Wild Wild West aspects to it, but
right.
it's kind of a you know, there were some comic books. I remember back to the 80s and 90s, there were some of the comic books that transposed present day superheroes into Victorian times. Like there was the Victorian Batman, you know, steampunk Batman.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, he had the goggles and all the steampunk trappings, and, you know, leather and buckles and all that kind of gears and things.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was also back in time, and almost, you know,
Right.
steam times.
I
So
love
it's
that.
it's got a few different things that is doing sort of a little bit of fan service. It seems a little
Yeah,
bit
I
of
think
down to vibe to it
But
too.
this is an original. This isn't based on anything, right? It's not in a universe, or is it?
I
that I
don't think
know of.
so. I think Joss
it's all
Whedon is the creator, and
Right.
so it's amongst other folks. So yeah, it's an original idea. So it's going to take a lot of that stuff that Burke was talking about, and hopefully taking it in a different direction. It's hard to tell from a trailer. We can't. We're reviewing the trailer, or not reviewing the show,
Right.
but it looks like it's well mounted. Yes, yeah, this is about the trailer. So there's a lot. To me, there's a lot going on in there. Where does it go with the story?
Well, I thought it was a really effective trailer. They showed some cool actors that are kind of cool cult actors. We have Nick Frost. We have, a bunch of like familiar faces kind of sprinkled throughout, and
Ben Chaplin, Olivia
Ben Chaplin.
Williams.
The fact is Joss Whedon, who has, he's done some incredible, like, strong female characters like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I'm interested in seeing him approach this too with, looks like these characters will be really strong, and, where he's all like, why are you doing this? He's like, oh, it'll be fun, So making it, they're not these wilting flowers. It's like these very strong women with their own ideas. So I like that idea. It's going to be, and it just looked beautiful. I mean, they showed some great scenes. I mean, even just the whatever we look like snow, but it probably wasn't, like, things kind of coming from the sky. You have that cool kind of carnival-esque looking, background. It looks pretty great.
Yeah, that era is so great visually and for the supernatural kind of stories. Like I'm thinking of, the Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula film that had a that Victorian coolness to it, and the styles and the fashions and
right
carriages and things like that. It's got like Sherlock Holmes vibe to it.
Sure,
it's very Penny Dreadful. I don't know if you guys saw Penny Dreadful.
Yeah,
I loved it. Loved it.
great.
And I thought it ended too soon and ended very quickly and not very satisfyingly. So I'm hoping that this will kind of,
one thing I'll bring up, this might be a good time to bring it up, is something that is interesting. Speaking of old times and superheroes, I've recently been reading these books that I've always been curious about, but the Doc Savage books. I don't know if you've ever read those, but I'm sure you've seen the books in the bookstores with those really great covers painted by an artist named James Bama, I think, of Doc Savage. And he's this muscular golden man, bronze man who I'd always heard was like the prototype superhero. And he is from the 1930s, which is, I guess, not as old as steampunk, but the stories were written in the 30s. So they have an old timey vibe to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about the idea of superheroes in the old days, that's really appealing too, that, where you have like we were talking about the technology that we saw in this trailer, like this old fashioned car and, before, and before cars. And then that was the thing about Doc Savage was, you know, when you read these books, they're very fun to read. They move along. There's lots of action. And you realize, wow, this is where superhero stuff came from, you know,
even before Superman.
Yeah.
I mean, that was before Superman.
Yeah. Yeah. And Doc Savage had a Fortress of Solitude even in the North Pole where he would go and study. And there was also a character named the Red Skull and all kinds of things that people just sort of, you know, borrowed from Doc Savage.
Right.
And the idea that such people existed in the old days is kind of fun. It's an alternate reality, like, you know, what if kind of a thing.
Yeah,
what if
I love that idea.
It was a superhero, an Avengers kind of superheroes team back in the Victorian days. You know?
Right.
Well, I sometimes think too, like it's just one step away from like a lot of times women were thought to be witches if they didn't just sort of fit into that subservient role. So I think you're kind of taking it that extra level of, you know, if women didn't fit into the mold they were supposed to, then they were considered these like, what? And so it's only one more step to go beyond into their superheroes or have superpowers when they're probably really basing it almost on just women who have their own minds in a way. And that needs to be squashed or exploited. That's sort of the
Well, what if there was a woman back then who was a really good playwright or something, or a good author or something, and the publishers were like, "No, madam, people don't want to read a book by a woman." You know.
Well, you know, they probably write under a pseudonym that's a man's name, right?
Exactly. I mean, that was happening up until the 60s. I mean, there were especially in genre type writing, and notably in science fiction. Because a lot of people thought, oh, a woman doesn't know anything about science. How could she write science fiction?
Right.
And the publishers were saying things like that. And they were basically just you're like, no. And so there were writers like James Tiptree Jr., who was actually turns out to be a woman after all these years. And people loved James Tiptree's books.
Not on purpose.
You know, it's
sad,
like,
but true. You
change the name to a man's name. Suddenly it's a great science fiction book, you know?
Right.
So that's our review of the Nevers trailer, which actually I'm very interested in seeing. It's coming on HBO. Yay.
It's a series, right?
It's a
we'll
series.
Definitely review this series for sure.
April 11th. So it's coming very soon. And we'll check it out and we'll come back at you with our thoughts of the show.
Right. See you next time.
Yeah. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
The Earth is invaded by indestructible moon monsters.